welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for coming today. Today I'm super excited to tell you all about the books that I read in January, and I can't believe January's up. It went by so fast, but I did read quite a bit of books. well, well, for me, a lot. I read a total of, I've got my cheat sheet here with how many books that I ended up reading for the month. And looks like I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I read 9 books this month. And I read a lot of some really great ones. So I'm going to just go through each of the books I read this month, and then I'm going to tell you about what they were about. Just want to share my thoughts with you. And like I said, some of them were really great. In fact, I just finished the last book, really, like not too long ago. So I was reading all month. And so let me go ahead and and then I'll also tell you what books that I didn't get to, and I'll link below my January TBR. I had a lot of, like a pile of possibilities of books that I wanted to read this in January. And then I'll talk about the ones I didn't get to, ones I'm going to put off and going to continue to read. And then also some books that weren't on my TBR that I ended up reading. And I don't know if you're like me, if you plan to read certain books, but then something else catches your eye and you're like, I'll read that instead. So I have some of those too on my list. So, all right. So I'll start with my DNFs first. So the first book I DNF'd this month was a book called let's see, I make sure I get it right. The Circus. Oh gosh, where's it at? Oh, DNF, sorry, The Night Circus. And I'll put it up here because I had that checked out from the library. So, and I really like the premise. And one of the reasons I had picked that book was because in January I was hoping to read like fantasy book. At least I thought that I was in a fantasy mood. And so I thought I would read some fantasy books. And so that was a book that was supposed to be about a circus that was only popped up like magically at night. And that's when people could go see it. And I thought, hey, that sounds, pretty interesting. And I had heard it was a really good book. If you've read that, please comment below. Let me know if I should maybe give it another try. Didn't get very far at all. And the reason I stopped reading it was because it started using like language right away, like boom. And I guess I'm like, well, okay, if they're going to show me what this book is about. But also, I guess it really got me because it was directed at a child. And so I was like, it didn't, sorry. Forgive me. It was directed at a child. And so it was, I don't know, it just didn't sit well with me. So, and last year, I didn't do like DNFs, and once I started, I just kept reading. And so there's so many books I really want to read that I thought, well, I can't just, keep on even if I'm not really into it or something about it bothers me. So I just stopped reading it. And thankfully it was like right away. I mean, it was like, I think it might've been even in the first chapter this happened. So that was my first DNF of the of the month. And then there was 2 other books that I didn't get around to. And the first one was, I started it, but I didn't get as far as I wanted. And this is Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. And it's not that it's a bad book. It's just that, I don't know, I just couldn't, there was other books that were getting in the way and that I wanted to read. And then I was also reading this with my husband and we couldn't find time to do it and that kind of thing. But I really want to do it. I started reading this book with Sam over at the Book Bunch, and I do want to mention Sam and her channel, and I'll link her channel below. When I found her channel, I was just so happy because a lot of her books that she recommends and reviews are fantasy books, but they're Christian fantasy, or like this one, a clean, not necessarily Christian, but they're a clean fantasy book that you can read. And a lot of our fantasies out right now are they're not clean it by any means, and there's all kinds of stuff, and you know, if you don't like that, then her channel, she gives you so many great recommendations for those kind of, especially the Christian fiction fantasy books that are coming out now that are really good. So I do want to continue to um, read this book. Hopefully, finish it in February. If not, this will be like a winter book. It'll be like over a few months, but definitely want to try to finish that one. And then this one that was also on my January TBR didn't get far at all. And this one is another sci-fi book, and I've got all three of these books that my son gave me for Christmas, and so I'm going to just slowly read this one as well as I go, during the month. So, but it is what I've read so far is good. I just have to fit it in. And then one other book that was on my January TBR that I just didn't even crack open to read it was Shadow and Bone. And I've heard this is a good book. It's just going to go back on my shelf. I'll have to wait, and maybe I'll come up on a prompt or something. Let me know, and if you've read this book, because it's not new. If you've read this, if you think it's worth it to read, I don't have like the whole series. I just picked this book up used, so I don't have the other books like waiting for me to read. So if I don't get if you don't think I'll like it, then I can probably maybe unhaul it or something. Okay. So those are the books that I didn't get to. So let's talk about the books I did get to, and I read some really good ones this month. I really did. And so I feel like I'm forgetting something. I hope I'm not forgetting something. It'll come to me eventually. Okay. So the first book I read in January was this book called Submerged by Dani Pettrey. And this book I read to do Jane Reed's her Christian fiction challenge. Sorry, kind of like I said, I got my notes down here. And her prompt for January was to read start a series. And so this book is the first in the Alaskan Courage series. And I actually have all of the books. So this is a series that hopefully I want to try to finish by the end of the year. There's, I believe, 5. This one was pretty good. I was expecting more, I guess, maybe because so many people have talked about it and everything, that I don't know. It was okay. I think I gave it maybe 3 stars. It could be 3.5 stars. And the story wasn't quite what I thought it was going to be, maybe. I mean, but it was good. But it's about a young woman who comes back home to Alaska. This book was set in Alaska, and she has quite of a past that she had in her youth, like when she was 16 or 17, I believe. And she was kind of seen as like the bad girl in town with a reputation, and now as an adult, I believe it's 10 years since then that she's lived here. She's has become a believer, and she's a Christian. So, but she still has that reputation when she goes back to this town. And the reason she goes back to this town is her aunt that had raised her, well, not raised her, but where she was living with her aunt in Alaska after her parents had passed away, I believe. So her aunt had died in an airplane accident. So she had come back to settle her aunt's affairs because her aunt left her everything. And so she was sad because her aunt died, of course, but also she was nervous about being in the town again, with how people would think of her and everything. And also in the whole story is like a mystery. Is something going on behind the scenes that they are going to with the police and everything are going to solve while this is going on. And so that's what this book was about, kind of like a suspense with a little bit of romance in there with her and the boy that she had feelings for when she lived there as a teenager. So I don't know what the host, I'm assuming that the whole series is probably going to be set in this town with these people, and maybe a different character from the people that I've already met. I have heard that the series is good, so I definitely going to continue since I already have all 5 books. I'm going to continue with this. So that was the first book I read. Okay. So the second book I read this month or January was Salt to the Sea by Ruta Sepetys. And this one I read for Katie's Paperbacks and Ponytails, her challenge, or Read Around the World challenge. And her prompt was to pick a book that has something on the cover that you would pack. Like if you're going on a trip, what would you pack? And so this cover has shoes on it. So I would definitely pack shoes to go on a trip. And this book was really good. I really enjoyed it. And this book I got used on Pango. And when I purchased it, I didn't realize that, not until when I got it, whoever had it had tabbed it, which I didn't mind, and then they had written, had just underlined things. But this book was set in 1945 in the winter, and it was surrounded a group of people, refugees that were coming out of Lithuania, I believe, and they were escaping. It's so sad because these people were escaping. The Russians were coming in from one side, and then they had the Germans coming in on the other, and they're basically in the middle, and both sides are going to capture them and take them. The Russians will take them to Siberia, and the Germans are going to take them to a camp. It was just horrible. And we're following 4 different characters, and I really love the way the book was written. Each chapter is like a person's perspective, and they're really short chapters, so it was really a short read. And so it's like that with the different people, and they're each of their perspectives of them traveling, and they're all trying to get to a port to get on a ship to take them out of this war area, to get to safety. And that it's a really wonderful story about how they all come together and what they all experience, and then they get on the ship, and you think that that's going to be, they're going to make it, but it's, I don't want to. I mean, the back of the book says the forgotten tragedy that the forgotten tragedy that was 6 times deadlier than the Titanic. So that doesn't sound good for the ship that they're trying to make it to. And the hope, and when I picked it up, I thought it was going to be them on the ship, pretty much the whole book, but that's not. The whole book really is them is their journey to the book, and to the boat, the ship, and then when they're on the ship is really like the very last part of the book, But one part I'll share with you. So one of the characters and is a guy named, let's see, what's his name? Oh, his name's Alfred. And throughout the book, I was thinking, this guy is like, his character was kind of weird. He was a weird character, a strange character, but that's what he was. And then the girl, I think it's the girl that had this book, she wrote a little note here on this particular part, and she wrote, "Ooh, he creeps me out." And I'm like, yes, it creeps me out too. So I thought that was the only thing she wrote in the book. Everything else she underlined and tabbed, but that specifically, she said, this guy creeps me out. And he was a creeper. But I love this book. And then when I was finished reading it, I realized after the fact that I actually have a book that's like goes with it. Because when I told my husband, I gotta have another book of hers, and I started reading the back, and I recognized the names from this book. So I'm like, oh my goodness, they're together, and I didn't know that. So you all probably did, but I didn't know that. So I'm definitely gonna read this book. Not next month. I'll maybe, I don't know, sometime I'll get around to it. But I definitely want to get back into that story. Okay, get that out of the way. So that one, definitely a great read. Okay, so the next book I read, it was Oh, I skipped a book. I'm not going in order as I thought I was. I really did. I skipped a book. Oh, it's only because it's not. I don't have it here. It's a book that I read. I checked it out on Libby, and it's called. Let me make sure I get the right title. It's called Love on Ice, and this one was by Carolyn Miller, and I'll put that up here. And this one was a really cute love story, and it was based around Christian fiction romance, and it was about a young girl, well, not a young woman who was a speed skater she was an Australian speed skater. And if you know about speed skating, it's very dangerous, but it's so fun to watch because they go so fast and they crouch down when they skate, and she did like the short track speed skating. Anyway, it's about her story and her competing and trying to make it to like the Olympics and things like that. And she meets a another athlete, but this man is a professional hockey player. And so I read this with my husband. This was the book that we read this month together, and I read it to him. And because he loves hockey, his favorite team is the Vegas Golden Knights. I hope I get that right. And him and my son love hockey, and so it was really fun reading that book with him, and because the guy played hockey and everything, and the romance was really sweet. They had a really good relationship, but it was kind of tense because she lived in Australia and he lived in the States, so they had that long distance relationship. So that was really good. If you want to, if you that was my first sports themed kind of romance book, and so I really enjoyed it. So I definitely recommend that one. Okay, so after I read that one and Salt of the Sea, the next one I read was Caraval, and then that book I just mentioned, the Love on the Ice, that was I ended up using that for my prompt for Oshina's challenge because, and I used the prompt new to me author for Carolyn Miller. She was a new to me author, so that was that book for that prompt. Okay, so then I read this book, and this book I had purchased on Pango a long time ago because I had heard. Well, actually, let me. I had seen reviews for this author's series that she's got going right now, and I should have written it down. But anyway, that series sounded really good. And then I reached out to someone, and I asked them, hey, is this, do I have to read this? Can I just start this one, or can this series, or do I have to go back and read this, the Caraval series? And I think they said you didn't really have to, but if you wanted to get more out of the series and everything, it'd be good to go back and read this first series. And plus, she recommended this book as well. And so that is what I ended up doing. I ended up, I had checked this out last year several times, but I just never got around to it. I just kept returning it to the library. So I thought, well, if I buy it, then I'll have it on hand. And so I got it secondhand. And so I put it on my TBR for January, and I'm so glad I read it. It was so good. It was so good. And so many of you know this book revolves around a woman that is, her and her sister are, they are living with, and this is all a fantastical world. It's not, reality or anything. It's just all pure fantasy and separate world and everything. But her family live on an island of some sorts, and they don't. Their mother's not there anymore, so they just live with their father, and he's very abusive, extremely abusive. And so they're, you know, look forward to the day when they leave, um, leave him. And one daughter, the oldest daughter, has had this fantasy of participating in what's called this Caraval. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but I guess this is kind of like a big to do that a person by the name of Legend puts on, and he's kind of mysterious. And people go to this and they participate in it, and it's like a game. And at the end of the game, whatever the contest is or whatever, you win a particular prize. And she's always wanted to go, and this book is about her and her sister leaving, kind of like basically running away and going to participate in this. And they go with the hopes of just having fun and winning the prize, and it turns out to be so so different for them, and it's just a really crazy little, not crazy, but it was really intriguing. It really surprised me. I really like the romance that developed between her and one of the characters in this book. And one of the parts at the end, I was telling my husband, and when I was reading it, I was like, it made me go when I read it, because like, oh no, if you've read the book, you might know what I'm talking about. But so this is was a good read for the month. I'm looking forward to reading the next one next. I am going to read the second book in February. I already have it checked out from the library, so um, that was a fun book. And I don't know if I had this on any of my challenges. Oh, I think I counted it for Angie's book mama, her challenge, because I think her prompt for January was read a book that you wanted to read last year and you never got around to it. So that was what I used for this one. Okay, I need to hurry it up because I think I'm going too slow. But these books were so good. I just want to talk about them. The next one was the book that I picked from my little jar of the books that I want to read for the year. And this one was wonderful. And this is called From Sand and Ash by Amy Harmon. And this is a book that it's a historical fiction that deals with a woman living in Italy during the time of World War II and the Germans and Hitler and everything. And she is a Jewish Italian citizen, and the things that the Jewish people went through in World War II are just horrendous. And this book deals with that subject matter, and her relationship with a priest, a Catholic priest there in Italy, who she grew up with as a child, and their love for one another, and how they pretty much protected each other and got through those hard times. And her she had she was a violinist. Her uncle, so she was half Austrian and half Italian, and so her Austrian family taught her music, and she was a really wonderful violinist herself. And I did want to read a little portion of this book to you because it just got me. So I just wanted to read it. Because when I read it, I was like, oh, just, and it doesn't, it's not spoilery or anything, but it's just her uncle talking to her about what's happening to them as Jewish people, and it's pretty intense. So he says, his voice was tired, his words measured. In my life, I've only been good at one thing, the violin. Not as good as my father. Maybe I could have been, but I drank too much and I lost my temper too much. I came to Italy because I failed in Vienna. I came to Italy because I was in love with a woman who wasn't in love with me. And for the last 13 years, I've taken it out on you. If you hadn't been so strong, I might have broken you. I might have made you hate me, but you fought back. You shrugged me off, and now I listen to you and I am in awe. You are? Eva asked in amazement. These were things she had never heard before. When you play, Eva, I am hopeful. They can take our homes, our possessions, our families, our lives. They can drive us out like they've driven us out before. They can humiliate us and dehumanize us, but they cannot take our thoughts. They cannot take our talents. They cannot take our knowledge or our memories or our minds. In music, there is no bondage. Music is a door, and the soul escapes through the melody. even if it's only for a few minutes. And everyone who listens is freed. Everyone who listens is elevated. When you play, I hear my life lifting off your strings. I hear the long notes and the scales and the tears and the hours. I hear you and me together in this room. I hear my father and the things he taught me that I passed on to you. I hear it all, and my life plays on. His life plays on over and over when you play. I love that. And that was this. If you like reading historical fiction books, especially if you like reading those that deal with the things that happened in World War II with the Jewish people, I highly recommend this book. This is one of my favorite historical fiction authors, Amy Harmon. So that was a great book, a great read for this month. After that, I read reading that kind of book, really, hard hitting. I wanted to change it up, so I read another suspense book, and was by Irene Hannon, and it's called Vanished. And this book starts off right away. And this book is about a young woman who was driving down the on a rainy night in the evening, and it's really dark and the rain's pouring, and then all of a sudden she sees a woman like flagging her down on the road, and she swerves to miss her, but when she spins she feels like she ends up hitting her. And she's alarmed and everything, and but she's okay in her car. And then a man shortly after that walks up to her and asks her, "Hey, are you okay?" And she's startled in shock and everything. And he tells her, "Hey, I'm gonna call the police." And she tells the man, "There was a woman on the road. I think I hit her." And he's like, "Okay, I'll go see if I can find her. I'll call the police, and then somebody will come to help." And then she passes out. And when she wakes up, and she's there alone in the dark, and she's like, "Well, where's the police? Where?" And she looks at her watch, and she realizes she's been out for like an hour. And so she's like, "Where is the police? The police should be here." And and then she ends up calling 911 herself. So the mystery of the book is, when the police get there, they don't find the woman that she hit, or the good Samaritan, as she calls him. And so in the rest of the book is about her trying to find out what happened to this woman. And at first they tried to tell her, "Oh, you didn't see that, maybe you hit a deer," and there's no other cars there. So but she was like, "No, I remember her vividly. I hit her." Excuse me. And so they say, "No, you had a concussion." So she finds a private investigator to investigate this case, and that's what the book's about. And it was really good. I That was a really another quick, fast read, sorry, for me. And I really enjoyed that one. And that I'm going to continue that series, because I picked up the third book at a book sale, and so I want to read the first two before I read that one. And that was really good. It was a really good, not after reading the um, heart wrenching book, with Amy Harmon's book, that one was a good, you know, uh, suspenseful, try to figure out what happened. So that was a good one. Okay, so after I read Vanished, hmm, sorry, after I read Vanished, I picked up one of the actual books that, well, the other ones were on my TBR too, but I picked up a winter read. And this one was, it's called The Snow Child, and it's by Eowyn Ivey. And this book I picked up because it was recommended by Gloria Thompson, and she reads a lot of historical fiction, and I always get great recommendations as far as historical fictions from her. And she really enjoyed this book. And so this book, the premise is a couple living in Alaska in 1920, and they're an older couple that have never been able to have children, and they decide to move to Alaska, and and start homesteading there, and it's really difficult. And when the story begins, they've been there a couple years, I believe, and they're finally starting to, they have the house, their home up, but and farming is really hard because of the weather and just how it is in I was going to say Australia and Alaska. And the wife is really getting depressed and she's starting to have second thoughts of why they came there. And it really was her idea because she wanted to get away from everything because she had lost a child, and they weren't able to have any others, so she was sad about that as well. So one night at the first snow, they playfully have a fun night, and they build a they start building a snowman. And then the wife, I think, says, well, let's make it a little girl. Let's make a snow child. So they made a snow child, and they put, a scarf, a red scarf and gloves and everything. And they even put, like, I think hay or something for her hair. And then they were just had fun that night. And the next morning, the snow child is gone. And then they start seeing a little girl. I don't know if you can see they start seeing this little girl and this fox in the woods. And where'd she come from? They try to go and seek her out because that's hard to believe. They start asking around in the town, does anybody have a child that age? Because she's out there by herself, and nobody did have children that age, and nobody was reporting anybody missing. So the townspeople just thought, well, not the townspeople, but their neighbors thought they were seeing things. The cabin fever was getting to them. So that's the story of the book. I don't want to say anything else because I don't want to give anything away. But it really was a really wonderful, beautiful story about them as a couple, their relationship, and what happens in this book did not go the way I thought it was going to go. My husband and I each had different theories. He had a really good theory, and I'm like, oh, that's probably what it is. And he kept saying, is that it? Is that what happened? And then when I finished, I'm like, no, neither one of us had it right. So it was really great. It was a really great winter read. I mean, I felt cold when I was reading this book with all the descriptions of the winter there. And I don't know how people live. Even now, I don't know how people live in Alaska with the cold and everything. But it was really great. Highly recommended if you like historical fiction and kind of fantasy too. So there's that. Then I had a little short book with all the big books. This one is I used for Chantel's read your bookshelf challenge, and I went down the Doyle route, and I have a dog on the cover, and this is called Hachiko Waits, and this is about a true story. This is it's a middle grade book, and it's based on the true story of a dog that's loyal, so loyal. And some people might have seen the movie that they made with Richard Gere for like this book. Instead of being in Japan, it was in the United States, but it was the same story. And so it's so good. This dog was so loyal to his master that after the master had died, the dog still went every day to go pick him up at the train station. And he did that until he died. And even Ellie and I looked it up, found some YouTube videos about him and how he's honored. Even in Japan now, they have statues of the dog and everything for his loyalty. So this was a nice little read. And then, like I said, it was my prompt for January for Chantel. Okay, I think I'm at the final book. And this was definitely an add-on if you watched my what did I put this on? I think I put this in my February TBR. Yes, I think I did. Because I said I had just gone to the library to get something, and I found this book, and I had started reading it, and guess what? I finished it. I did finish it. So it didn't even make it to February's TBR, and it was so good. It's called The Frozen River by Ariel Lawhon. And this is another recommendation by Gloria Thompson. Thank you, Gloria, for two really good books you gave me, the Snow Child and this one. And they're both winter. This one's another one that was so, I mean, you just feel like you're freezing in the cold winter. And this one was set in Maine in 1789. And this book is a mystery. And it's also a really beautiful love story. And even Gloria mentioned it about a love story between a couple that's been married for many, many years. In fact, the main character is a midwife, and her name is, gosh, why? Martha. And she's a midwife, and she's my age. So I was like, wow, she's my age, and she's a midwife out in the winter doing all this. And back in those days when there was no electricity, and just amazing. And she was such an amazing woman, because not only because she was a midwife, but she was so smart, and she ended up being really the detective in this book, because the book is revolves around a murder. It opens up with like the first line. I'll read you the first line in the book. Let's see if I can get to it. Oop. The first line in the book: the body floats downstream. Like, okay, we're going to start right there. And since it was wintertime, their river freezes. So the body was frozen in the river and in the ice. And so, and you think that the book is going to be about just solving that mystery, which it is, it does that, but there's other, I mean, this, you're really looking at the whole town, and it's different stories, but they kind of they're all interwoven because they all affect each other. And her husband are 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 such a beautiful couple that love each other, like I said, after all those years, and are they rely on each other and help each other really make it through these hard times in this um, where they're living. Really awful characters in this book. There is I will say there's a trigger warning for rape in this book as well, and it does it is a big piece of the story too that she's trying to solve. and there's so much, it goes back and forth between her and her husband when they first get to this part of the country, settling this new land for themselves and their family, and their hardships, having lost children due to illness and things like that. It's such a good book. I highly recommend it. It is not a Christian fiction, but there's Christian themes in here that you see throughout. It's not necessarily a Christian fiction book, but it's really hard hitting too. But it's really good. I mean, the mystery, you're trying to figure out what happened, and it takes you all the way to the end till you find out, oh, okay. And again, I wasn't reading this one to my husband, but I was telling him about the story, and so he wanted to know, hey, what happened? He thought he had his ideas of who had killed this person, and I had mine, and I don't think either one of us got it. It kind of was a real twist at the end, but really great. So that I finished the month off on a really good book. This was definitely a 5-star read for me, and probably a book that's probably going to end up on my favorites of the year, because it was such a good story. Okay, so I think that's it. Let me see. Got that one. I got that one. I got that one. Yep, that's it for this month. I had a really good month, and I I did 3 little. I'm doing well, I'm not doing, but Katie with Paperbacks and Ponytails gave. I talked about how she put last year. I don't know if she's doing it this year, but last year she tracked all her states that she went to. So I went to definitely Alaska. I had 2 Alaska books. And then I had a Vanished was in Missouri. And the last book I just read was in Maine. And the other ones I couldn't count because they were, you know, overseas or fantasy. So that was kind of cool. All right, so please let me know in the comments below if you've read any of these books. Tell me what you think, and let me know what you read this past January. And let me get my notes here. I want to make sure. I feel like I'm forgetting something. Oh, I just want to say that the add-on books that were not on my January TBR were the Love on Ice, the romance book, and then Vanished. Those I ended up just picking up. And there was another one that I didn't get around to reading, was The Governess of Highland Hall. That was on my TBR video, my January one, but I didn't end up reading it. And then so I switched that one out with Love on Ice. And so that was it. That was it. All right. Well, thank you so much. I'm sorry it was such a long video. I just wanted to talk all about these great books that I read this month. Thank you for watching, and hope you stick around and like and subscribe. And again, remember to comment below if you've read any of these books. And you have a blessed day. Bye-bye.